Hello and welcome back to my view from the piano bench. An increasingly cluttered view, that too, but just all the wonderful things that are going on and things that are falling into place for the future. For example, while you watch this, as this begins, if you're watching it as it premieres, we've just started a show down in Lewis, Delaware for the Tree Blue Jazz Festival for our Blossom Theory project, Sharon Sable and I, with a couple of wonderful musicians with us as well. And that project is coming right along. We'll hopefully have the CD and digital releases for you soon. Lots of other things going on to keep straight. Speaking of keeping straight, I just about forgot. Thank you for all of you who support and encourage me via the links available that you'll find on the support page of my website. The link to that is in the video description. There are different ways to do that. A drop in a tip jar is always appreciated. And if you're so inclined, take a look at how I've set up the Patreon, which is kind of an easy extension of that. And again, gratitude to all of you who do help and allow me to keep doing these things, because it's cool. I want to keep doing them, even though right now things are all stacked on top of each other. So full disclosure, I'm recording this the night before, but that's kind of what I've been doing anyway these days. So speaking of keeping things straight, the topic for this week is when you can't, or when all you can do is memorize. So maybe this will be interesting to you, and it's kind of a theme that I hit on often, but it's taking it from another angle and something that I've really been thinking about lately. So in order to get started, I'm just going to play a tune. All right, a nice little tune. Moonlight in Vermont. Just tried to be in the moment with that tune, like I always try to be, and allow the moment to be whatever it is, which means, of course, it's different every time. But that's, I guess, not necessarily expressed or understood when I play. Although it's true that hopefully, it's obvious that I'm playing from here, that I'm playing with emotion and all of that. But, there are people who straight read sheet music who can also play with emotion. So it makes sense that somebody might come up to me after me playing something like that and say, how do you memorize all that? Well, of course, what that does right off the bat is tells me their perception of what music making is. Their perception of what music making is reading sheet music. And what reading sheet music is a learned skill of processing and translating information. It's just information on the page. It's not music. We make it music. And then I recall somebody saying to me, they were trying to figure out what goes on in my mind that and I must have a photographic memory, and I picture the sheet music. And then I'm reading the sheet music like in my mind. Oh, how confusing that would be. That would be horrible. If you wanted to torture me, suggest something like that, and I'd be insane really quickly. But we all tend to look at things through the lenses of our own temperament. And one thing that you probably can't miss coming from me, if you hear me talk for more than 3 or 4 minutes, is that we all have our own temperaments, our temperamental characteristics and groups and categories, but we're all our unique person. And in order to make our unique contribution, we have to take our unique person and use that and be that. Because that doesn't mean you can't grow, it doesn't mean you can't improve, doesn't mean you don't build new skill sets, but it means you are who you are. So on one side of the street would be this idea of memorization, where you've read the music and then you can recall it. And I guess it would be the same thing as being able to pre-write a speech, or even perhaps more impressive, read a previously delivered speech by somebody else, memorize it word for word. Oh, this reminds me of a funny story. It has nothing to do with this, but I'm going to tell it. But anyway, word for word, and do it strictly from memory, reliably, every single time. So, what that reminds me of is back in another neighborhood where I lived for a long time, my next door neighbor was an unofficial comic actor. He did do some things like that, and did some things for me. You can actually find him on a couple of YouTube video posts. His name is Brian Whitaker, and I used him for a comic actor when I would do my He's Stepping Out shows. And he's well suited for the role. And talking with him was like a comic act sometimes. He was a theater guy too, very, very gifted. And this story doesn't have anything to do, but it's funny. Especially if you know Brian. I shouldn't have said his name, but I did. And it's okay. Hi, Brian. So we were next door neighbors at the time, and we were standing on his front driveway. And I'm saying something, I don't know what we're talking about, but somehow the preamble to the Constitution came up. So speaking of things that can be memorized, or that people do memorize. And his eyes got real big. And he said, "Preamble? You want the preamble?" And then he proceeded to stand there and verbatim recite the preamble to the Constitution in the voice of Porky Pig. And then he was so proud of himself, he said, "You didn't think I knew that, did you?" And he walked in the house. And I just look at his daughter and says, "Yeah, I know. We weren't talking anyway, right?" And I walk home. Right? But, memorization is a gift. It's a gift that I don't have. So when somebody asks me, how do you memorize all that? And I say, I don't. And then, of course, I realize saying that is going to raise some eyebrows. And of course you did. You played it. No, I just knew my subject. And that opens up a whole nother way of conversation. So the other side of the street, my side of the street, rather than like have a memory of all the component parts so that you can create the whole thing, it's more having a memory, you would say, of what the big picture looks like. And then being able to recreate that big picture or something like it. Not exactly it, because at that point you're kind of interpreting, right? So I can play the tune and it's recognizable as a tune. I play 100 different times, it's going to be 100 different ways. So when I really need to like recreate something I did, it's kind of like, because I don't remember exactly what it was, I can remember it conceptually. And I ask myself a question that's more or less, well, what would I do if I were me? if that makes sense. In other words, I find it again. And for the people that I accompany regularly, that's something that, especially if they're used to hearing the same thing every time, they get used to, because they do hear the same conceptual thing every time, but not exactly the same thing, because I have to find it again. But finding it means just stepping into the moment, if that makes sense. So I kind of did a little arrow around thing on my notes here, so I've confused myself already. Yeah, so there is this story and a YouTube video documentation, and I don't remember the name of the pianist, and I should have written it down, but I wasn't sure if I could pronounce it. But it's pretty well known in classical music circles, of a pianist who performed at a concert with an orchestra, a Mozart concerto, and then when the orchestra started playing, if you watch the video, she becomes very trepidatious and overwhelmed and scared because she prepared the wrong concerto. What do? Well, this illustrates, and if you watch some of this video, it's easy to find on platforms. It's amazing and an insight into that process, because somebody, a high-level concert pianist, is going to have, at some point, prepared a bunch of those things and play them and memorize them, but just not touch them, but then dust them off when you need them. So when I say she prepared a particular concerto, it's one that she had previously learned, which in her world is memorized. No play, no changing things. It's just memories burned in there, and the classical players can do it. And what she just did was she just reached back to the concerto that she didn't practice, that she hadn't played for a very long time, and nailed it. With this pain look on her face much of the time, and that is the epitome to me of a magical skill set. Or classical pianists who just like do a master class and wind up, them demonstrating something that they hadn't played in concert for decades, but they don't forget it, right? That kind of memorization. Now, for me, it's a conceptual thing, like I said. And the opposite of what I said about myself, knowing what the big picture looks like and being able to create something recognizable as that, the other side, the classical side, or the structure side, we'll say, is like locking the pieces of a jigsaw puzzle together. Now, I often talk about, one temperament, one side of the street being like putting together a jigsaw puzzle and the other like taking it apart. But in both cases of temperaments, if you're going to present something, you're going to present the complete picture. So it's really like how you're arriving at the picture, how you assimilate the picture, how you deal with the picture. So once a jigsaw puzzle is put together and you like shellac or whatever you do, the pieces in place, right? There it is. And then for someone like me, you know, I see the picture, which means I get the meaning, right? And then it just disintegrates on its own. It's all biodegradable very quickly. But then I can, you know, recreate something sort of like it. So even though I practice classical music every day, I never perform it straight because I can't. And if I absolutely had to, I'd have to have the music in front of me, which is its own problem. And I actually don't think I wrote this down for this topic, so I can stick it in right here. It dawned on me why, when you're a classical pianist, you are encouraged and often forced to memorize. Most teachers will do that. Some will not. And I don't know that everybody even understands why. I started looking online today as to, you know, people answering questions why. And not everybody hits this point. And I think the real point is that it's only when you have something totally internalized, whether it's a conceptual understanding or a shellac together jigsaw puzzle memorization, once it's completely internalized, then you can begin to express it, because the expression does not involve our logical, conscious kind of thoughts. It involves the deeper things, and it's actually a brainwave function, something I learned recently too. Just everything, you know, the longer you do something, especially if you do it all your life, the more you figure out, and it's really a cool thing. And so without the piece being internalized, memorized, or conceptually understood, you're actually not going to be able to reach those deeper levels of expression. And if the classical teacher or the classical system or the classical pianist is prioritizing expression, then that memorization is going to happen. And this pianist, in the example I talked about, was definitely able to express. So for me, I'm not going to put music in front of me and struggle and stare at it. Things that I've literally played thousands of times. So I remember a theme. They're easy because you can move them around keys. It's just whatever. And then I'll improvise on the theme. And actually, I hope to, one of my practice disciplines, and I have really too many I try to do concurrently. When I'm busy like this, none of them really happen. You know, I'm just pretty much making sure I'm prepared for each show. But the long-term goal is to grow out the themes and the complexity of the themes that I'm comfortable improvising with. But this one's simple. You know, if you can't memorize, you can still express, right? I started that kind of low, didn't I? Move up. you go a little canon and D-ish kind of thing. One of the things as I purpose to, and certainly often not successfully, or at least not completely, was I purpose to observe myself playing and, be as much of a spectator as I am a fully committed participant in my own thing. I noticed myself beginning to quote, "We're off to see the wizard." And it's like, maybe I should be serious here. So I don't always intervene in my process, except occasionally, if the vehicle is about to hit the guardrail, I decide I don't want a dent in the car this time. I'm going to touch the steering wheel a little bit. Those quotes. But as a friend I used to play gig with a lot would say that when I'm really, really connected, is the quoting is kind of a signal of that, and I think it's true. It's like my peripheral vision is where I wind up seeing the most. So anyhow, so if you find yourself as a musician or just in general, because I would like these lectures, whatever they are, to be, generally applicable. These aren't music lessons, and not just for musicians, but I hope musicians get something out of it, and I hope everybody else can as well who watches. So you have a choice if you find yourself on one extreme side or the other. And one is just ignore it and live there. And we can think of, famous jazz musicians or other musicians that couldn't read music, or composers. Irving Berlin, he had to have somebody, and I saw a documentary, and his daughters were speaking for him. He had passed, that he would have his musical scribes. And also Irving Berlin could only play in one key, and there was a key that used all the black keys. And I've heard different accounts of whether that key was D flat or G flat. I'd always thought I had heard G flat, but lately people are coming around saying G flat, which is one or the other. They both use. Did I play the scale wrong? I certainly did. Both of which use all the black keys, and then he had a piano with a movable action, so he could actually play in whatever key he wanted to while playing in the only key he knew how to, right? Or Earl Gardner, or take your pick, and you can do that. But the okay, I'm actually jumping ahead of myself, so let me stop. If you allow yourself to have limited skill sets, which is like just simply your best gift, you do limit the application of what you can do. Because just because you can do something famously, or it feels like that's all you can do the other thing too. You're just not going to do it as well, and it's not going to come as easily. Evidenced by me really having to work hard to absorb something from sheet music and then forgetting it and all. But I can do it, right? But it's much more easy for me to do this, so that's what I do primarily. And the example I often give is a public speaker or a preacher giving a sermon. Are they working from a prepared text that they rehearsed, or when they deliver what they do, that they just speak extemporaneously? And it's often some combination of the two, right? But we can all do that. If we had to, those of us who, are watching this, and we can have a conversation with each other, and that's spontaneous, or we could write something down and read it to somebody else. And that's the other side of the street. We're capable of both. And to me and to most, the best thing that you can do is broaden yourself and give yourself more references and open, more avenues in your intuitive kind of vocabulary space. Because anything that you work on, you can grow into even if it's going to eventually be channeled through your primary temperamental strength, if that makes sense. So uh, it's, again, not that you can't, you can, but it's just that one side is, it's going to come more easily on one side than the other, depending on who you are. Which, of course, is not true. Anything you can do, I can do better. And no, but we can all do our unique thing. So, in music and in life, your path is shaped and conditioned by the choices you make. Right? And actually, there's a lot of nuance that I want to say there in a more esoteric spiritual sense, but I'm going to leave that alone. Come on, Joe, you can do it. Leave it alone. Don't touch it. And a story of that would be a big band that I worked with a long time ago was doing a show and was going to have a guest artist come, and it was a known, star kind of guy, right? And we had just assumed with the big band where we were that this guest artist would come and sing a few tunes, and we didn't have big band charts or anything. We were just going to kind of fake our way through tunes we knew, and maybe have some of the band sit out, and it's just like we would have a singer in front, a normal thing. But then this person strolls in with a giant suitcase, right, and had the entire set of big band books. So this person traveled with pre-written big band arrangements. They got distributed to all the musicians, which kind of infuriated the band leader a little bit because we weren't told that, but that's where it was. Here was our problem. The drummer in the band could not read music. The drummer in the band was well versed in all of the material, knew all the arrangements, knew what to do. Big picture, conceptualize, internalize. But if you're working in a situation, it's a reading situation, which a big band is, and my reading chops aren't great, but good enough to do that, right? Especially in piano where you have lots of liberties, right? But there's going to come a time, when even if you know the material, that skill that it's a combination of don't have and refuse to develop, right? Although that's a strong word. You see, we can put the emphasis wherever we want, with this, because it can be looked at all kind of different ways. But it's like this person or anybody else would have the opportunity to learn the skills so that when the time comes and you need it, you're not going to have a problem. And he had a problem. But fortunately, one of the trombone players in the band was a drummer who could read music. So guess who sat out that little adventure? The drummer in the band. And the trombone player who could read music went over and played drums and read down the charts. And actually, the guy was beside himself impressed. He wasn't used to walking in and imposing his big band book and having the players actually be able to do it well, which was all kind of funny and ridiculous. So a contrast to that, saying that this drummer or his musician or Garner, say, doesn't know how to read music, and you learn how. Well, yeah, the other side of the street would be like a classical musician having no idea how to like jam with others or play with others, and they make themselves go to jam sessions, which actually would be really cool. You go to jam session, you don't know what you're doing, but you put yourself in the environment where you can start to learn, because now you're not going to have your fallback things to read, and you're going to have to listen. You're going to have to figure it out, and eventually you will, at least to some extent. So it's a choice we make, but it's a very understandable choice. And this is something impressed on me years ago as a piano teacher, and kind of informed how I did things, which was not how most teachers did things, or, to the extent I teach now, not how most teachers do things. If somebody has a natural path to something, like if they have a goal, and then they already have like a way to get there, but they want to, improve, of course, so they want to get better at that goal. If you tell them, okay, we're going to have to cut you a new path to get there, and it's going to be more of a pain in the neck, and you're going to have to work harder to get there, how easy do you think it would be to motivate that person, especially if it's a young kid, right, to work harder at something when they already have an easy path? Get what I'm saying? And that works on either side of the street. If you're already a good sight reader, and then you're trying to learn like chords and improvisation, and you're struggling with it, after a while, it's just like you put the music in front of you and you play because that's what you can do, and then you feel better. And it's like, I don't need to know this stuff, right? You just throw it away. And you have to persuade yourself. Of course, the other side applies too, but you have to persuade yourself that it's actually worth it to work the other side of the street. And I believe that I did talk about not being able to memorize. I think I did something in this series called Why Piano Lessons Fail. If I didn't do it here, I did it in the other series. And this is the part about it where the temperament of the teacher doesn't match the temperament of the student, or no accommodation is made. So it's like, no, you're never allowed to improvise. You only have to play what's in the sheet music. That's a skill. It's not the only skill, right? So the phrase I use, which is, when I started thinking about it, not entirely correct, but the essence of it is the goal is to perform to your strength and practice to your weaknesses. Spend the time building the skill sets you don't have, while of course strengthening the ones you do, and performing to them is one way to do that. So it's kind of like that the sun really shines on both sides of the street, except for the obstacles that get in the way, the things that throw shadows or the clouds in the sky. And if it weren't for those things that are movable with work, I mean, you can't walk up and move a cloud, they'll move on their own. But, if you're standing in the shade of a tree and you don't want the shade, you can cut down the tree. If you get what I'm saying. So, there is again a sense where we have control over that. So what side of the street does the sun shine on? Yes. Well, that certainly wasn't memorized. But that's just kind of what I do, right? Uh, so hopefully I did an okay job of advocating, of performing to your strength and practicing to your weaknesses. So then here is a kind of bottom line to ponder. You only really have what remains after you let go of it. In terms of playing the piano, in terms of expressing yourself, once you let go of, in essence, trying and sort of like straining to like get through some kind of constipation that's not going to move. Well, once you stop trying, what's left is what has made its way deep inside through whatever your process is, the shellac on the jigsaw puzzle or the conceptual understanding or knowledge. And at that point that the classical pianist memorizes a piece, and I've heard classical musicians make this distinction, not all the time, but some do, and I would agree, that at a certain point it's no longer memorization. And actually someone who made this point was Chick Corea. Not long before he died on one of his live streams, because he talked about knowing in contrast to memorizing. And memorizing involves, that process of, holding on to something and trying and essentially thinking. And knowing is when you no longer have to think about it and it's yours. And it's yours and it's not going anywhere. So he would certainly be an advocate of memorizing. And as much as I can, look at Chick Corea and see his kind of structure, I think memorizing would work for him better than it would for me. And that's a positive observation of him, not a negative. Because again, the really, really like cream of the crop, top of level, few in a generation people are those who actually are strong all the way around. And most of us are not. And I certainly am not. So the classical pianist deeply learns something. And for me, I guess something in this deeper place is a conceptual knowledge. In either case, and it certainly was the case with this classical pianist, she trusted ultimately her ability to express from that place of knowledge, that place of knowing, right? And that's the goal. Not everybody is really clear, though, that is the goal. But if you're a musician or if you're just anything, that's your goal, to really, really know, to master something so that you can, I'm ready to quote the title of Kenny Warner's book, Effortless Mastery, right? And I've recommended that before. So I'm going to add just a little anecdotal thing since I've run out of notes, but this is actually very applicable, and it's actually very cool. And I won't name names, and this person, it's possible that this person's watching this video. Hey, you might already realize I'm talking about you. And there's no reason I couldn't say names or anything, but I'm not going to, just to be safe or whatever. But I started YouTube posting in 2007. And actually back then, I had a more active YouTube following than I do now, because for a number of reasons. One, how I structured my channels, which was kind of dumb in a way. And I wound up getting distracted by other things and didn't really nurture the community that I had initially created on my original Joe Holt's Notes YouTube channel, which was formed in 2007. There's all these other YouTube channels that actually have the year 2008, 2009, 2010, all the way up to now 2022. There's reasons I keep that going. Uh, but uh, for whatever reason, maybe the algorithms were different then too, but it was, I built a community of people like around the world, not local entirely, people who couldn't come to my gigs, but knew who I was because of that. And my most viewed YouTube videos, even, for some time, not just because they've been around a long time, but they were most viewed before, or some of those earlier ones. One in particular, on the sunny side of the street, that I did in a nursing home I thought it was 2007, could be wrong. 2008 if at most, but one or the other. It's probably pushing 60,000 views now, which, in the big YouTube world is nothing, but in the small niche world, it means people are paying attention. And people who follow me kind of, strongly, a lot of them are aware of that video. And there's even a transcription of it available on YouTube that you can download for free. That somebody did, which is super cool. And I remember this person posting then, or commenting, and there were a bunch of names and different musicians I would get to know. This person I really didn't know, right? But there he was. And then when I started getting more active again, some of those people rediscovered me, or have just been with me all along, and I'll get a message like, I watched this video 200 times now, and now I'm watching this one, and yay, and, which is, wonderful, right? So because this person, when I moved my live streams to YouTube and uploaded them as video premieres, because Facebook was being really stupid, that put what I do in the view of those people who follow me on YouTube, who may not be in Facebook, or didn't even know I was doing it. And so one of those people found my stream, right? Or found a Piano for My Friends video and did a tip jar thing. Now, I'm probably disclosing something that I would be advised not to do, but I'm already doing it, so let's do it. If you do send me like a tip on, say, PayPal, which this person did, I will have your email address, and I can follow up with you, and of course, I never had a way to message this person, right? Even though, I've been aware of this person been aware of me for 15 years or whatever it is. All I could do was just like respond to comments, right? And so I reached out to the person, and somebody who lives not in this country, lives in Europe. I now remember the phonetic spelling of how George W. Bush pronounced Europe. Anyway, and I wound up, and well, again, I'm saying things. When things are behind the curtain, you typically don't want to pull back the curtain, because the Wizard of Oz is not who you think he is, right? But I'm pulling back the curtain. So, one of the things that I can do, if I'm really grateful for something, is say, let's have a little conversation. Let's do an informal lesson. Let me just see if I can help. Let me be helpful, and I love to do that. And this person is a real musician, a real pianist. Oh, and I had heard, because I now had a way to communicate with this person, I was able to hear some things that this person had posted and done, and I actually recognized a note for note thing of something I played in a hymn that this person. It's like, okay, I'm getting what's going on here. And I referenced that, and it was like, well, I don't improvise. All I do is just copy, right? So, and I found out this person has really advanced training and has really studied classical music. And it's one of those cases that I can't improvise, but actually, he can, and we all can, at least to a point, especially if you never confront it with how that works, because it's way different than reading music as you might expect. And I've talked about that specifically before, and I'm sure I'll do it again. And what was really cool is that we're doing a little Zoom conversation, an informal lesson, and I love this when it happens, and it happened very cleanly and nicely. That it's like you can just kind of navigate to this place, and now you're doing this, and can you feel what's going on here? Yes, it's making sense, and it's like, and you could just see, the thought bubble and the light bulb go on, right? And I like to believe, and I think this is true. And if you're there, you can, let me know. But we made it the point that we're going to talk to each other in a few months, and see what happens with what I told him. But I'd like to think that I helped them flip the switch and opened a way to broaden this person's expression. This person wanted it broadened, wanted to learn to improvise. I spoke with somebody else yesterday, no, 2 days ago, at the local retirement community who approached me about improvising. He studied at Curtis for however many years and younger, and played classical music, and he said he's buying all these jazz theory books, and he's overwhelmed by them. And I say, stop, don't, no. They are resource manuals, right? But the path to understanding this other side of improvisation, no. And we had the conversation. I think this person's light bulb went on. And I love that kind of thing. And I will continue as long as I can still play, as long as the tendonitis doesn't, eat me alive or whatever. I've done it most of my life. I have no intention of stopping, and hopefully I won't. I'm going to keep growing, and I can do things now I couldn't do before. So, okay, draw back the curtain, right? On my YouTube channel, on this YouTube channel, I decided to put the standalone video, and some of you have seen it, of the concert with Stephanie Lamont, the classical pianist, the First Friday concert, where she challenges me to play a classical piece straight. I play the minute waltz, and I do just a full-on Victor Borge shtick with it, right? I wouldn't have been able to play it effectively enough. It was funny, when I'm playing it, I'm really trying in parts to play it exactly right. But those of you who are classical pianists, look at that thing and see all the things that I'm doing, not on purpose. I'm playing one of the lines, one of the chromatic, lines that are sustained notes in the wrong octave, or I'm like changing a different harmony. That's the kind of thing I'm talking about. But even to get it to that point took a lot of work, right? But there it is. But I posted it, even though I know that if I waited a year, I would be better at managing those details. But I like the shtick, I like the effect, and it was passable. A few wrong notes, right? A few wrong notes, and that was, I think I'm going to regret having posted it there. But if I didn't post it there, I wouldn't be able to share that with you, And that's just kind of my own living out what I am encouraging all musicians and all people to do, which is just learn how to be the best version of yourself, and then expand yourself and be the best version of that. Expand yourself and be the best version of that. So when you can't memorize, or all you can do is memorize, yes, and own it, and push yourself out as well. So I hope that's helpful. I really appreciate you being here. I appreciate all the encouragements, the emails that you send. And I am often very slow in answering emails because I'm overwhelmed with them. It's difficult being a one-person show, right? But I eventually do respond, and know that I'm grateful for everything, and for your support and encouragement. looking forward to doing the show, which is going to be still going on in Lewis, Delaware, where you're watching this. It's 7 to 8:30, and this will be coming up on 8 o'clock on the night you're watching this, if you're watching it when it airs. So thanks so much. Airs, dated reference. Oh, here's funny. Boy, am I off the subject or what? Story of my life. What was I talking about? Did I mention ADD? Huh? So, you know what we used to say years ago now? You know, that there are certain phrases that young kids aren't going to know what they mean. Like, it sounds like a broken record. What? But that's actually super dated now. So some years ago, and it was maybe 6 or 7 or 8 years ago, I had a piano student that I went to her home, and she was going to play a concert at school where there wasn't a piano, and I was letting this person use my keyboard. So I brought the keyboard over to the house and left it with them. But we did the lesson out on the porch for whatever reason. Maybe no. Maybe I put the keyboard back in my car and took it to the school, but I let her try it at her house. That's what it was. And so, you know, to make it simple, we set it up on the porch. And it was slightly windy. And the music was blowing around. So I say to her, and her mother was in earshot, I said, "Do you have a clothespin?" And she looks at me all puzzled, said, "What's a clothespin?" And her mother intervened and said, "Chip clip." Then the girl knew, oh, okay, and got me a chip clip, which kind of today will do what a clothespin does. Funny dated reference. Anyway, thanks so much. Hope to see you soon. Tomorrow night? Yeah.